Welcome in, everybody, to episode 7 of my Pro Unreal Engine tutorial series here on YouTube. Today, we're going to continue making some of the classes we need, and today it's actually going to be the character and all of our related components. So, for those of you who don't really know, the character is going to be the player we are going to be controlling throughout the gameplay. It will also be used for any non-player characters that are in the game. I find it better to have just one character class as opposed to a player character and a non-player character class. And the reason behind that is because it just makes things easier and it gives us functionality to possess and unpossess characters, which is also pretty cool depending on the game we're making. I don't think we're going to need that for Hide, Seek, Survive. But again, the whole point of this plugin is to be able to migrate code to new projects. So it's good to build in some future functionality. So with all that being said, let's get right into it. As always, we find ourselves at our Jira board, and this time I'll create the issue with you guys. So press create issue, and we'll call it create character and related components. See a bit of indecision on the title here. Yeah, create character CCS core. Yeah, we'll just say character CCS. And we'll edit the description real quick. And just when I'm done writing the description, just pause and copy what I have. But basically, the character has a bunch of components that we're going to need to make up the character. Stuff like the camera, that kind of thing. And a lot of people put all their code on the character class, and that is a valid way of doing things. But I prefer to keep the character class really clean. So it's just going to be a whole bunch of components on the character class, and the character is going to tell them to do things. So if you think of it as the character is the general of the army, and the components are all its little soldiers. So we'll have things like the camera, this anim instance, all sorts of stuff that the character is going to be made up of and that it's going to utilize throughout gameplay to do everything that we need it to do. And I'm a big proponent of just making my own components to separate out functionality. In some of my earlier projects, the character class just became very unruly because there was so much code on it, and using components is the best way to combat that issue. So that's what I'm going to teach you guys from the start. We want to avoid the situation of having like 7,000 lines of code in the CPP file of our character, and that's the best way to do it. Alright, so I'll quickly assign the task to me, put it as engineering, put it under the get started epic, and we should be good to go. And we'll move it up to the board for good measure. And speaking of the board, we're going to head over there and throw it into in progress. And now we'll open up P4V. And now that we're in here, we're going to open up the source of our CCS core inside of creators, just to make sure I'm being consistent with the naming and the folder structure. It'll just make things easier on my end. Alright, so we'll right click and make a new change list. And it's best to just make the description exactly what the name of the task in Jira is, just for easier traceability. Alright, so we have our change list, and now we can start making our components and our character class. So to do that, we'll go into our folder, launch our solution real quick. And then we'll open up hide, seek, survive. Just waiting for it to load here. And now we'll open it up. And we'll go back to see what our folder structure is. And just go down the list. So we already made the game framework stuff in the last one. So we just need to go down the list of all the other classes that exist there. So to start, we'll open up the content drawer and go back to our public folder. And we're going to make the anim instance first. It's going to be very difficult to explain what this is without actually making the animation work. So just take my word for it that we'll need this to feed our animations certain data, like the speed of our character. Alright, so we're going to put it in the animations folder and just call it anim instance CCS. Oh, sorry, the animation folder, not animations. So make sure you don't make that mistake. And we'll sit tight while it gets created. Just get all the live coding going here. Alright, and it's all set. So we can open up Visual Studio and reload. And we're getting an error with that plugin, which is fine. And we see that everything got added, so we're good. And now it's time to move on to the cameras. So right click, create new class, and we'll do the camera component. And this is going to be exactly what it sounds like. It's just going to be the camera that we're actually looking through during the game. So we'll put it in the cameras folder, and we'll call it camera comp CCS. And I like to shorten the names to comp versus the full word component because it keeps the name down in terms of characters, which isn't a problem with this one, but something like the character movement component, CCS, I believe would be over the character limit. So just for consistency, I abbreviate component to comp. Okay, so live coding is over, and we reload, and we're all set. So now we'll move on to the next one, which will be the player camera manager. And this again is exactly what it sounds like. Yeah, just checking to see the name. But basically, it handles transitions between cameras, which I don't think will come into play during Hide Seek Survive's development. But if it did, we'd be prepared to handle camera transitions. So yeah, player camera manager, CCS, public cameras, and we'll create the class. But yeah, a good example of where this is used is if you're aiming down sight, transitioning between the ADS camera and the main camera should be done in the player camera manager. Yeah, again, we got another error, but it seems fine. So we'll move on to the next class we have to make. So go back to the top level public, and we'll search for character movement. So the character movement component handles things like the movement state. So whether we're walking, crouching, all that stuff, as well as our speed. And it's also very important for networking. So yeah, put it in the character comps folder. And yeah, create class. But yeah, this one's a pretty major one, and we're going to be doing a lot of development on this. For Hide, Seek, Survive, it's not as important, but for an actual game with a bigger scope, this is one of the most complicated pieces of code you're going to have to write. So yeah, just get ready to get real familiar with that later on. Okay, so next we have the input comp CCS, and this is one that I just use. It isn't a default Unreal component. So we're going to search for actor component. And what an actor component is it's basically just a blank component we can put on anything. So we'll call it input comp CCS. And there is actually an input component in Unreal Engine, but it does something completely different. I just like to call it an input comp because it does manage all the input for the character. You'll see more when we start building it out, but I'll explain while we're doing that why it's such a good idea to process your input this way. Because input processing functionality can add quite a bit of scope to our character class, and as we said earlier, that's what we're trying to avoid. So we don't need the weapon component in Hide, Seek, Survive. So we have characters and pawns. So pawns are basically anything that you could control. And the character is basically a pawn that is built out more to contain additional functionality, like a default collider, a character movement component, and it's what you want to use if you're just using a standard humanoid character. So we'll put it in the characters folder and just call it character CCS. And we'll wait for the live coding to complete. And hopefully we don't have any issues. Alright, looking good. So now we'll move on to the next one, which will be the controllers. And just press reconnect if you get that error. It's no big deal. Okay, we'll reload all again. And now we have the AI controller and the player controller. And we forgot to put those in our task in Jira. So we're going to add those in to the description. Yeah, we just forgot the AI controller, so just add that in there. Just for consistency's sake. Alright, new class. And AI controller. And we're going to change it to A lowercase I, just because the two uppercase letters and then the uppercase C has always irritated me. So yeah, we're going to put it in the controllers folder. And an AI controller is exactly what it sounds like. It's just the top level controller for AI characters. And that contrasts with the player controller, which is what we're going to be making next. And that obviously is what you use as a player to control the character. And you see, we end up with an issue here. We can't open the include file for the AI controller. And it's a scary looking error, but just don't worry about it. It'll be easy to fix. So what the issue is our plugin is not already including the module that contains the AI controller. So what we need to do is go into Google and try to find the documentation for the AI controller. And as you're seeing, I'm having trouble finding the documentation. But you just have to stick with it, and eventually you'll find it. Yeah, typically it's easier than this. Yeah, for whatever reason, it's not coming up, but I do find it eventually. You see, this isn't what I'm looking for. I'm looking for the more detailed documentation. And see the little red, it means that it's not finding it. Yeah, so see, that worked, just copying in the actual class. And now we can click onto the actual documentation. Okay, so this is what I was looking for. And you see that module, AI module. So that is what we need to include because we need to tell the compiler that, hey, our plugin needs access to that module. And we do that in the builds.cs for the plugin, which is found in the top level CCS core source folder. And when we get in there, we go to the private dependency module names. And right at the bottom of that comment, we need to copy in that AI module and then put a little comma at the end as well. And that should be all we have to do to fix this. Yeah, so again, private dependency module names, AI module. And we're going to close this down. It would build right there, but I'm going to regenerate the project files. And again, just delete the binaries and intermediate, because this is how you get rid of that little red squiggly. Again, it would work without doing this, but I'm just proving a point here. So again, we'll just sit tight until that intermediate folder pops up, and then that's how we know the project files are done regenerating. And there it is. So now we can open up our solution again. And we'll sit tight while it loads. And we'll notice now that the little red squiggly is gone because it can find the include file it's looking now for the AI controller.h. And don't worry about the one next to the .generated.h. That'll come up from time to time and it will never be an issue. And if you do get an error about the dot generated, just regenerate the project files again and try again. Okay, so we build and we're all good, so that's good. And now we can open back up Hide, Seek, Survive and make our player controller after that little detour there. But at least you guys get to see how to look up documentation. So we go into our controllers folder and we go to player controller. And again, it's how human players control characters. And we'll call it player controller CCS. Very predictable, I know. And we'll create the class. And I'm pretty sure this is the last one, but don't quote me on it. And then we'll have to fill out the boilerplate code like we did last time, just for completeness sake. Alright, looks like that worked. And we'll take one more look at Perforce to make sure. Oh yeah, we're not going to need the save game or the debug HUD yet, so we are all set. Double check here, make sure we have everything, and we do. So now it's just the boilerplate stuff, and we're ready to roll. And we're going to do a bit of a speed run on this, because I already went through the process of typing out all the comments last time. Yeah, so just get rid of that space, and then we're going to pull up the game instance, so we can just copy this and paste it in. Yeah, so we can just paste over that and change where it says game instance to player controller. And that's essentially what we're going to be doing for all of these. As fun as it would be to type all the comments out again. Because as I was saying last time, these descriptions will evolve throughout our development. But for now, there really isn't anything in here, so no need to elaborate further. And I accidentally closed it down, so reopen it. And we can just do the exact same thing, just paste it in, and then just overwrite the game instance part. Yeah, so again, pretty straightforward. And then just get rid of that little space. And we'll do the same thing in the .cpp file. In the character, we're going to leave it for last. And this one, the input component, we are going to have to do a little bit more in here. But the comment part will be exactly the same, so let's just take care of that first. Yeah, so character input component is what we're going to replace game instance with. Alright, and now we have to reorganize this a little bit. Okay, so we're going to add a space. And these public and protected specifiers, I'm not going to get into what they are yet because it's going to confuse you. So just follow what I'm doing here and just throw that function under the other one in the public section. And then right there, just press enter to put another space so we can see the whole function declaration all while looking at the screen without having to scroll over. And same thing for the protected. Alright, so now we're going to add a multi-line comment. So if you recognize that same format we used on the description. So this is the constructor, and it does exactly what it sounds like. It will run when this object is constructed. So we're going to put a whole bunch of code in here later, but for now, we really don't need to do anything. So just copy that description. All it does is disable tick, which is the next function we're going to talk about. And what tick is it runs every time a new frame begins. So when the frame refreshes, this tick function will run. So it's very heavy on resources, and we really want to avoid putting things in here as much as possible. That is why we're going to be disabling it in this, because we don't need it. And as you see now, I'm writing some parameter tags. So this is where we basically write a quick description of what the parameter is. So just copy what I have here. So yeah, there are a whole bunch in the actor component tick function. In the standard tick function, it's just delta time, I believe, but we got a few more in here, all good. And as you can see, if you hover over things, sometimes you can get a little description of what they are. And that depends on how well it was commented. Yeah, so as you can see, we don't have a description for the F actor component tick function. So I'll just summarize what it is. Alright, so now we have begin play. And we'll make another multi-line comment and fill in the description for this. And basically begin play fires off right when the actor has loaded in. Well, in this case, a component. So in theory, when play has begun. Alright, so we're all set. And we can move over to the CPP file. Get rid of that extra space. And we don't need to have comments in here like they have. But I like to break it up into a public and protected section, is what I usually do. So, same thing, we want to move the tick function into the public section so that it matches what we have in our header file. And then we can add a protected comment there. So, yeah, just make sure yours looks like mine. And now we're going to get rid of this comment. And we're basically going to say that we're disabling tick because we don't need it. And this is just going to boost performance, which is always good. So change that to false, get rid of the extra line, and we're good to go. And for this, we're just going to say we're calling our parents' version. And what that means is before we have any of our own custom logic, that super tag is going to call the parent's version of the tick function. So whatever actor component does on tick, we're going to do before we call tick on this component. And that's something you never want to forget to do because really weird behavior can happen if you forget to call the parent tick function on a function that you're overriding, like we are here. But yeah, just make sure yours looks like mine, and we should be all set. Yeah, a lot of this is just spacing and commenting. It doesn't seem important now, but it will be later. Alright, so we'll just copy our game instance description again and paste it in here for the character movement component. And again, just change the character movement component. And we are almost done. Yeah, and just remember to keep saving all, just in case your Visual Studio crashes. I don't want you to lose all your work. That's why you see me habitually saving every 5 seconds. Yeah, so same thing for the player camera manager. Just filling out the boilerplate so it's ready for later. Alright, looking good. Now we move on to the camera component, so we're just doing the exact same thing. We'll paste in our game instance comment again, and just replace it with camera component. And I believe the anim instance will be our next one and the last one before we go back and finish up the character, and then we'll be done for today. Alright, get rid of that little space, and we can close this down. And now we have our anim instance. And just same thing, switch game to anim. Looking good there. Alright, excellent. Now we can move on to the character. And this is going to be a lot like the input component, where we're going to have to move around some functions. So we'll paste those public functions below the first public line. People like to have the constructor in its own public section, but I've never really understood that. Better to have them all together, if you ask me. Alright, so now we're going to need to paste in this special constructor. So just copy that exactly as I have it. The reason we need a special constructor is because we need to specify the character movement component to be our custom one instead of just the default. Alright, so we're going to go over to our game instance and copy in the description. Yeah, so just swap this with character. And now we're going to fill out a comment for our special constructor. So yeah, as I said, this constructor, the main reason we need the special one is to specify our special character movement component that we're going to be using. Because the constructor for the normal character would just use the default one, and that's no good for us. So yeah, just copy that description, and then I'll add a parameter tag for our object initializer. Yeah, and you see that one gives us a description, so that's good. It's always good to do a good job in this param tag, Because when I go back and look at this 2 months from now, I'm not going to remember what this was. That's the thing people don't realize about commenting code well. It benefits you as well as the other people on your team. Alright, so now we have the tick function again. And this we're also going to disable for now. We're probably going to need it at some point, but it's good to just disable it until we need it to boost performance as much as possible. And see, this one's a lot simpler than the actor component version. Now we have our setup player input component, and this is where we bind all the inputs to functions that will occur when the input is pressed. I believe 2 lectures from now, I guess it'll be 3, we'll start hooking up the input and we'll use this function quite a bit. So stay tuned on that. All we need to do for now is just comment this correctly, and we'll call it a day. So yeah, another parameter tag. And that U input component is the other input component that I was talking about. And it has nothing to do with the custom one that we're making. Yeah, so just make sure you have everything the way I have it here, and you're all set. And then we're going to add this pragma region, and we'll say Unreal default public functions. And we can just copy that and paste. And we'll say end region right there. Because the reason we want to do this is, as I was saying earlier, the character function will always be the most crowded header file that you have. So it's good to keep it organized. And as you can see, we can collapse this section, which makes things easier later on when this is going to be filled with all sorts of stuff. Yeah, so same here, just write our begin play function header here. And we're going to do the same thing in the protected and just say Unreal default protected functions. All right, looking good. And see, we can collapse it. Now we'll go over to the CPP and get rid of that space. And same thing as before, we need to make a little protected and a public comment. And we should be all set. And again, we'll just cut and paste those functions where they went in the header file. Because it's very important to make sure this CPP file matches the header file. Alright, so now we need to get rid of the little red squiggly by filling this out correctly. And don't panic with all the new stuff. Just pause and copy that exactly as I have it. And as I said earlier, all we're doing here is setting the character movement component to be our custom one. So this way we can add additional functionality that the base character movement component doesn't have, which is going to be very important as we move forward. And as you can see, it doesn't know what that character movement component is, so we need to add an include for it. So we can go character comps, character movement component CCS and see how I added a space in between the two includes? That first include should only be the .h file for the actor that we're working on. Yeah, so same here, just disable tick because we don't need it. And here we're just gonna say call our parents version. So same as the input component. And we're doing the exact same thing here, just call our parents version. And last but not least, begin play. Alright, so we're looking good. Our character is all set. And it's ready for us to work on it. Not next time, but the time after. And now we can get into our review. So that's good. So go back to our board, move it to review. And we'll build hide, seek, survive, and then we'll go and package it to make sure it all looks good. And then we'll call it a day. So this should build pretty quickly. Alright, all passed. So now we can go into hide, seek, survive and open it up. First, I'll delete the old build so we're ready for the new one. And we'll throw open hide, seek, survive. And then we'll package it up. Shouldn't run into any issues, but you never know. And we gotta wait for that query to stop. Yeah, it's still going. It takes it a while to find the SDK. So package project, select folder, and I'll skip ahead until it's done. And thankfully, our packaging succeeded, so that's good. So we can close everything down. And just test it to make sure everything's fine. And it appears to be, so that's good. And now we're gonna have to go in and make sure everything got added. It probably didn't, but that's okay. And we want to move all the default change list files into our numbered change list. And we want to go into the source for CCS core and make sure everything got added and see we're missing character movement component. So we want to make sure we add that to Perforce. And it looks like it got everything else. So the little green icon means it's already been added. And we'll do the same thing with the public folder. And again, it looks like it missed the character movement component, but that was it. So not too shabby from the simplified Perforce plugin. It did a good job this time. Alright, now we're ready to roll. And we can submit this. Add a period there, just for my own sanity. And we send it on its way. Chain set number 35. Add our comment. And we can move that into done. So congratulations, our CCS Core plugin is all good, and we're going to try to set a column limit here, but it doesn't do what I expected it to, so all good, doesn't really matter. I'll look into finding a way to make that column less crowded. But yeah, so we're all done with this, and next time we're going to make the HSS game plugin, and I'll explain why we need that. But basically, everything is going to inherit from CCS Core, and that's where we'll put custom functionality that we're only going to need during Hide, Seek, Survive. So that'll be exciting, and again, I'll go into that more next time. But yeah, as always, thank you so much for watching. Definitely leave me a comment if you're enjoying these videos. They take a long time to make, so I really appreciate all the feedback I'm getting. And definitely give the video a like. Commenting and liking obviously helps me out a ton in the algorithm, and it helps more people find my videos, which does a great thing in my opinion because it'll help people learn Unreal, and they won't have to pay for class like a lot of people have to do. And yeah, just subscribe as well to try to keep up with the series because we have a ton of work left to do on Hide Seek Survive, and I don't want you to miss it. And with all that being said, thanks again for watching, and I'll see y'all in the next one. Later.